Good evening, everyone. This is Demonick Angel here, and tonight I want to talk about the concept of Saturn Returns and what it has to do with the 27 Club and things of that nature. So essentially, when Saturn returns, that means that it's returning to the house that you were born in, and it takes approximately 30 years for this to occur. And Saturn is the planet associated with Father Time, with death. It is also the time that the Buddha, at the age of 29, leaves his castle and his wife and his children and his concubines, and he goes out into the forest and looks for himself. So the person that you were before you were, your Saturn returns, you can never be again, because that is dead. The reason that many of the celebrities that we call the 27 Club do not make it to 30 years old is that often you see they have been abusing drugs and stuff like sex and money, and they've kind of had this lavish lifestyle. They don't eat right, healthy, and so a person can only take so much damage and things that are not the right way to live. And so as their Saturn return approaches, they die. For them, it's actual death. And that is kind of the whole idea behind that. Some of the old hippies used to say, hey man, don't trust anybody over the age of 30. And I've heard several people say that, and I didn't know what it meant until I started studying astrology. And it just means, hey, once that person goes through their Saturn return, they're no longer a kid anymore. Like, they're not figuring themselves out. They're not young enough to party all night and feel great the next morning, or these types of things. So that's what that means. You don't trust anybody over 30. They are officially an adult. So typically people experience at least 2 Saturn returns, and most of us will experience 3. Very few humans experience a 4th Saturn return. So the first Saturn return, and it lasts a few years. Its influence can start in the late 20s and kind of go through the early 30s. Excuse me, which I feel like I'm at the end of. And it is Father Time saying to you, hey, it's great that you were young, and you still are. But it is now time for you to know yourself. And it is time for you to grow up. Become an adult. And yes, we're like legally an adult at 18 or 21. We can drink. That's not what I'm talking about. Or Father Time. Father Time and Saturn are telling you that your youth is behind you. You do not own it, you experienced it, and you do not have forever with the rest of your life. So choose what you value carefully. Do you value family and experience and travel, reading and learning? Or will you continue to value fast cars and fast chicks and drugs? Well, it's going to become harder to do that as you age. And sometimes we see people who are past their first Saturn return, and they're in this lifestyle where they have a couple kids and they're not really happy about it, and they're 45 years old, and and they go party and they leave that behind. That is because the first Saturn return was not a grounding force for them. They just played the part they thought they were supposed to play. And there are consequences to that. Eventually, your shadow self will have to be set free. So, but if you can work these energies during the first Saturn return, you can become very, very grounded and good with your finances, good with planning, and for some people like myself, I have a daughter, so my childhood is now behind me. I am young, but it is now behind me. And so until Saturn returns again, my focus is on rearing my daughter, continuing to work on myself, and helping others, and trying to remain grounded, knowing that I do not have forever this experience of demonic angel. I might get reincarnated, but this is not going to last forever. I don't have forever. I am mortal. And these are the phases. So by the time I'm 60, if I live to be that old, then that Saturn return is about looking forward to retirement. And you might not retire till you're 70, but nevertheless, okay, like you are going to work less, and then you're going to have time for yourself. And you can then say, gee, golly gosh, I raised my kids, I was young. Now what am I going to do with my free time? Do I like to garden? Would I like to go to a hiking club? Do I want to do arts and crafts? These types of productive, adaptive behaviors of the second Saturn return, rather than just, well, I'm going to sit on the couch and drink beer and ignore everybody else in the house. So it can be, if you do not work against death, it's Father Time and Saturn, and you understand that, what it is trying to give to you, it will ground you, and you will feel the energy, and you will feel a deep understanding of how time is supposed to be, the changing of the seasons. We will all get to experience just so many in this body, in this way we are, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I guess my last point would be, the final Saturn return that typically occurs around the age of 90. But its influence can start, around the age of 85 and last to, say, something like 95. And this is true death. you only experience those 2 Saturn returns that are not meant to represent physical death. This is the last seasons of your life, and it is meant for you to understand that you will soon die. You will soon cross over. Are you ready? Do you feel comfortable? Have you made peace with anybody that you have problems with? Have you wrote out a will and, feel like it's appropriate towards those family members? When, I would say at that age, stare at your objects, and if they don't mean that much to you, you could take them to Goodwill. But at the end, you can have a handful of objects to look at, and you're not going to take it with. But it's death. And so time and time again in my personal life have I seen this Saturn really just come and take people who enjoyed life. And the reason they lived to be 90 was because they knew that the next day the birds were going to sing. They were going to have their morning cup of coffee and chocolate, and the sun was going to rise again. And they looked forward to it. And so, although knowing of death's approach, they went kindly with a smile on their face, happy for the experience that we call life. So, like the lady whose house I live in now, she died at 88. My grandfather, he died at 90. Time and time again, I can think of people who pass away between the ages of 85 to 95. And they go with their final Saturn return. So you've got, it's almost like a 3 points, like the maiden, mother, and crone, or the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Saturn itself is a trinity. Youth is over, Saturn 1. Saturn 2 is find yourself, because you don't have to work so hard, you've raised the kids. And Saturn 3 is literal death. It's time to cross over. You've lived a long life, and it's such a privilege to have a third Saturn return. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I was just sitting on my couch, just trying something new. And then I'm actually going to go hiking with some friends in the morning. Don't know if I'll bring this along to record some of the petroglyphs or not. I'm going to try to. But in any case, my Saturn return has been very peaceful and grounding force. But if I resisted it, it would not have been good. Like, I'm like, oh, now I'm a mom, I'm going to go party. It wouldn't have worked out for me. But that's not how I am. I am grounded, and Father Time has whispered to me, and I do understand. And I am in my 30s, and I love this place in my experience, and I understand myself, and that's a valuable thing. Please check out my Patreon page. Once I get patrons, I will make videos for patrons only, religiously. So once that happens, I will get started on that. And of course you can check out my Twitter account, which I've been kind of becoming fond of. So I appreciate your interest in my channel, and please like, share, comment, and subscribe.